When I was floundering around in New York as a very young man, having graduated from Duke University and wanting to be a writer, I found myself in Brooklyn in a very cheap boarding house, which later became the Pink Palace in Sophie's Choice. And I was only there for a few weeks in the summer of 1947, but I got to know this very attractive young woman, and I was smitten by her. And I finally left this boarding house and never saw her again. Got enough of her background to know that she had suffered some terrible torments. She had been at Auschwitz. She had a tattoo. She had suffered horrors. She survived, and many survivors do make it. There's no doubt about it. But there's something about her that I felt was doomed. Many, many years later, in the mid-70s, she returned to haunt me. And one morning, I woke up with this vision of this young woman, Sophie, for that was her real name. And I suddenly realized I had a story to tell. She would reveal to me in layers of narrative, as one unpeels an onion, the various levels of experience that finally led to an absolute ultimate horror.
The whole film balances between the forces of life and the forces of death. And it's a ghost story. It's a ghost story and it's a mystery, because this boy goes into this house and the first thing he hears is this joyous humping. So first he's aware of their existence, and then he hears all this fighting, and then sees the cruelty of this man with this woman, and you say, well, what is that about and why? That is his battleground that he goes into, and out of that the true man and writer are forged.
Stingo is the audience. Stingo is every one of us watching this and taking it in, and then starting to feel very much a part of their lives, and very much then a part of history.
I thought of Stingo as young Styron, you know, sort of a tall, gangly, well-meaning, cultured voice, and sort of gentlemanly in a very young man. And Peter had that, but he also had a fragility that I didn't anticipate.
I don't think there was any question of an overall approach to the character. I think we've settled on Stingo, the sensitive observer of things, and that was to be the keynote of the performance.
One of the subtexts of Sophie is this need on her part to drive away the memory of the horror of Auschwitz through erotic realization with Nathan. My character of Sophie came from a profoundly repressed background, a Polish Catholic girl with all the repressions of Catholicism of that period in the 30s. She was coming from death into life, and sex at the hands of Nathan was a life force in itself, and a life force which almost repudiated the memory of the death to which she had been exposed to so profoundly and consistently at Auschwitz and in Warsaw and other places.
I think that people who go through a certain kind of horror become numb and have no feeling sometimes. And I think Nathan made her feel alive, even in the most horrific moments of their relationship.
As Nathan evolved in the book, I suddenly realized there were profounder well springs for this behavior of his, and it occurred to me that he had to be paranoid schizophrenic. There are a lot of paranoid schizophrenics running around loose, and Nathan happened to be one.
I remember asking him, well, if Stingo is you, then who's this Nathan? He said, well, Nathan's me too.
I need you like death. Hear me? Like back to Krakow, baby. Back to Krakow!
I didn't want him to be tentative or afraid. I also wanted him to scare me. I thought it was important. In terms of the sadomasochism of her sort of chasing the domineering father of her past and the Nazis and that sort of perverse search for the same horror that you're escaping from in order to punish yourself for the guilt you feel.
Tell me. Huh? Tell me, Sophie. The same anti-Semitism for which Poland has gained such worldwide renown, did a similar anti-Semitism guide your own destiny, help you along, protect you in a manner of speaking, so that you became one of the minuscule handful of people who lived, while the millions died?
The only kind of bookend to the depth of guilt that Sophie feels, the guilt of the survivor, is the guilt of someone who wasn't there, who couldn't be in the army, who couldn't go fight the war, who couldn't do anything, but he was stuck in Brooklyn, a Jew in Brooklyn in 1947 who is aware of these atrocities and in his madness intensifies it, so that he and Sophie are just sort of made for each other, these two tragic characters who were destroyed by their guilt, a sense of survivor's guilt.
I think that whatever kept Sophie alive across that journey to get to Brooklyn, across Europe and over, that there was hope in her.
We were all three in love, in a way. And the intensity of my friendship and Sophie's friendship to Stingo was unique.
Sophie was seeing through the layers of her memory into what happened then. And Nestor conceived of shooting this memory from outside the house. And since the camera was way far away, I thought they were far away, so I felt completely alone. I was alone with my memory.
I'll never forget that day. She started in a take, she started to go, and it was a very long speech, and she couldn't go on. It was too disturbing, it was too much pain.
I just remember the end of my childhood, which was when I was 10, and my mother dropped me off at the library. And I opened a book, and there were photographs of the Lebensborn program where children were taken in transports and supposedly to be adopted. And one of these transports just ran out of gas, and the drivers walked away and left these children, and they starved and died. And then the Allies came and saw the piled up bodies in the back of a truck. And I will never, ever forget that image. It forms the basis of my emotional understanding of unimaginable horror.
Live for me, Sophie. Live for me.
What have we done to you?
What she's saying there, we are bringing death to your life. You have a life force, and we're going to pull you in with us and bring you down with us. We belong together. You don't. We're bringing you into the arms of death.
It has to be remembered that Nathan, along with this libidinal frenzy, as a man who is headed toward death himself, because the opposite side of the coin of the libido would be a plunge toward the idea of suicide and death. And indeed, on the trip to Connecticut that they make together, their frenzied lovemaking is only a hair's breadth from the suicide that he's constantly tempting her with.